And once you start to develop that, this is how you are not going to fall into a spiral. Hey guys, welcome back to the Unchoreographed podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jenna, and today I want to give you a little bit of a personal story because I have been in a hip flare all week long. And I wanted to kind of walk you through real time what I'm doing as a physical therapist who specializes in this, what I'm doing to kind of calm my hips back down and get them in a place that I don't feel pain again. And I thought it'd be a really good learning opportunity to be able to walk you through sort of real time how to manage things like this, because it's really unrealistic to think that you are never going to have a hip flare again. That is just sort of part of life, right? Like there's going to be ups and downs. The more important thing is having a plan in place for when you do have a flare, and so that it never really turns into anything bigger. Maybe it's just a little bit of like mild discomfort, but it never actually turns into something that's problematic. And that's what I want to walk you through today. So just a little bit of a backstory on myself. I actually haven't had hip pain in a really long time. Bad hip pain, I should say. I get little flare-ups here and there, but it never is anything that turns into like a really big full-blown flare-up anymore. I probably haven't had that happen in at least 6 years. My son is 6, and it was definitely before I had him that I had a really bad flare where like I couldn't squat and do all kinds of things. Pretty sure that I had a labral tear. You know how I feel about MRIs, so I did not ever have imaging done on it. It didn't feel necessary. Definitely not something I've ever needed surgery for, but very likely do have a tear in there. I get your classic hip impingement type popping, clicking, catching, but again, that discomfort that I feel, or I don't even want to call it discomfort because on a day-to-day basis, it isn't discomfort and it isn't pain. I just sometimes feel a click or a pop and it's there. But as far as pain goes, I don't really have it much anymore. Every once in a while, I have moments where I have a few days where things will sort of get angry at me or grumpy with me, which is what's going on right now. And again, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to walk you through how I manage this so that it never actually turns into a full-blown flare-up, alarm bells going off injury per se. So for me, again, give you a little context of like what I think flared this up. I have been sitting a lot lately, and I've been a little bit less active. I've been really busy at work, which is probably a story for a lot of you guys, and I've just been sitting a whole lot more than normal. The other thing is I had a really bad headache the other night, and I know my pattern that headache and hip pain are really connected for me. And they often happen when I'm really dehydrated, which, go figure, I was probably a bit dehydrated when this first started. Again, I know this about myself because I've put in the work of tracking my patterns, understanding my pain, understanding my symptoms, understanding my hip. So I know that a really big trigger for me is when a lot of like, we call it fascial tension. So myofascial is like that, I call it the shrink wrap or the saran wraps that's all over our body, between our muscles, our organs, nerves. It's wrapped around everything. And it sort of connects everything together. And we can get tension in this. And this is often why you'll feel pain. You know, like for me, it's having a headache, but then I also feel my hip. Sometimes it'll go all the way down to my calf or my foot. So I recognize this fascial tension pattern in myself. And again, I know that that happens much more often when I'm dehydrated, or maybe if I'm about to get sick, if I have a cold, it gets really bad. I know that my hips flare up really bad when I have a cold. Moral of the story here is I know my patterns. I know what caused the flare-up to happen in the first place. Now, it may not be exactly the same every single time, but I do at least have a good understanding of my body because I've taken the time to understand my body. And that is something that I would want to encourage each of you to do as well. Take the time to understand your body. But before we get into the how-tos of it, let's talk about sort of what you need to do in the moment. Because if any of you have experienced something similar to what I'm describing, and I guess kind of what my symptoms were, it started at night. I basically couldn't sleep. I was up all night tossing and turning, finally had to take some Tylenol, and that calmed it down temporarily. But even now, as I'm sitting here, I'm still feeling a lot of discomfort. It's actually in both of my hips, sort of on the outside part, deep in that joint where you almost like can't really touch it. They just feel really achy. And I'm sure that some of you guys listening know that feeling, right? You've probably had really similar symptoms. And if something like this has happened to you where you've had a flare up, your thoughts start to spiral a little bit. You start going down that rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, did I undo all my progress? What did I do that made this happen? Did I tear my labrum again? Like, what made it worse? What's going on? Should I stop moving? Should I keep going? Like, the spiral, it starts, it's real. And so understanding to not spiral is a really important piece of this puzzle, because what happens when we start spiraling? We start going down that Google rabbit hole of 2 a.m. I'm going to Google my symptoms. What's going on? And it's going to tell you the absolute worst things possible. You start kind of aggressively stretching and trying to figure out, how can I like hit this pain? And you're searching all over to try to find it, and you can't really find it. You're trying everything, every stretch, random things on Instagram, and you're just trying to like piece together all of this stuff. And what I'm going to tell you, if you've experienced this, is the exact same thing that I tell myself and what I tell every single one of my clients, and that is, don't spiral. Stop spiraling. Build a plan. That's what you need instead. If you have a plan, you won't start going down that Google rabbit hole. You won't start logging into Instagram and doing every exercise under the sun to try to find one that might give you relief. During your flare-up, it's not the time to start randomly experimenting with different exercises. If you have a plan in place before you ever need the plan, you are going to be in a much better place long term. Understanding that when your hip does flare, there's a lot of things that go into that, right? It's not just maybe that you did one movement that brought it on. Maybe it is looking at things like, what's my stress level been this week? Have I been sitting more than normal? What's my nervous system doing? Like, do I feel like I'm in sort of this fight or flight response? Am I really tense all the time? You know, what's my hydration been like? What's my sleep been like? There's so many things that could go into it, and you'll drive yourself crazy if you try to pinpoint the one moment that started it or the one movement that did it, right? That can absolutely drive you crazy, and it will. So instead, it's better to understand and find, like, what are your patterns? That really is phase one of all of this, is knowing all the way, like, you should do this in the very beginning, right? And don't panic if you haven't done this in the beginning. It's not too late. You can still do it. But if you're somebody who's recently developed hip pain and can't figure out what to do, early on in the process, you really want to try to figure out what are your patterns and your triggers. And that can be hard to do, but it's very possible. And so what you have to try to do is track for a little while on a day-to-day basis, what are the things that are consistently making my hip hurt more? And what are the things that are making it feel better? Now, this doesn't need to be some long drawn out process. It can be as simple as a note in your phone, or, you know, I've got the journal that I'll link a copy in the show notes for you guys if you're interested in having a more formal way of writing it down. It can be a notebook. It can be anything, right? But simply tracking, what did I do today? Did it make it better? Did it make it worse? And just a couple very broad things. In that moment, in that day, you're not going to notice the pattern. But over time, you're going to start to notice the pattern. That's what we kind of want to look at. And we want to have a bit of tracking in place so that you can look back and say, okay, what happened over the course of the past week, the past month? Like, what can I for certain say this triggers my pain pretty consistently? And maybe it's not a specific activity. Maybe it's just a direction of movement. So maybe you notice that, squatting down seems to make it hurt more. But also when you bend over to put on your shoes, or you pick your leg up to put your shoes on or put your pants on, and that's happened pretty consistently over the past month. Well, guess what? That tells me, I know as a physical therapist, you may need somebody to interpret this for you, but I know, okay, that's hip flexion. Anytime you bring your knee closer to your chest, it seems to flare things up. So that motion needs to be addressed. And whether you are the one trying to interpret this, which I probably wouldn't recommend, or you're working with a therapist or a doctor or somebody, a professional, you can bring that journal or iPhone note or whatever into them and say, okay, here's what I've noticed. And now they're going to be able to interpret okay, it looks like you're having pain every time you do these certain motions. So now I can test these motions on you and see where it replicates things and whatever. And we also have a jumping off point for what you're going to need to maybe start move, what patterns you might start to need to move in, or what exercises you might start needing. So whether it's yourself trying to figure out the pattern or you're working with a professional, you want them to see the pattern. Tracking this is everything. That is step one to understanding your hip. Again, I've done this for myself, so I know what my triggers are pretty well at this point. So it's really easy for me to then jump into the next step, which is, okay, how do I calm this down? And this is the framework, that I use with every single one of my clients. We start with understanding their pain and then figuring out how to calm down their symptoms. And this phase, again, which is sort of why you want to do it when you're not actively in a flare, but it can be done when you're a flare. It can be done if you've had chronic pain for years at this point. So don't feel like you've missed the boat if you've had pain for a while. But hopefully early on in the process, this is when you're exploring your body and you're exploring movement and you're figuring out and tracking things so that you have a better plan in place for what to do when those flare-ups happen down the line. So from there, we can take that information and then figure out what are 2 to 3 movements that reliably improve and calm my symptoms. And this does take a little bit of trial and error. You're not going to land on it the first time you try. Sometimes you got to try an exercise. You got to see how your body responds. Try a different exercise. See how your body responds to that. So there is some trial and error. And hopefully you are doing this guided with somebody who can kind of help you through that process versus trying to just again, piece together things you found on Instagram. That's a little bit more of a scattered strategy. We want to kind of a clear process, and through that clear process of intentionally trying in different trialing and error. How do I say that? Different exercises, guys, words, they're hard sometimes. But through that process of trying different things, you're going to start to land on, oh, wow, every time I do this movement, it makes my hip feel better. And really what we're doing is we're sort of creating almost a little bit of a decision tree of, if my hip feels like this, I do this and it feels better. And once you start to develop that, this is how you are not going to fall into a spiral. This is how you prevent yourself from panicking and not escalating the situation, because you actually have a system to follow that's tried and true for you that works. Is it going to work every single time? No, but the majority of time, it's at least a starting point, right? The majority of time, it's going to at least start to calm things down. And then if you're needing a little bit more guidance or whatever, then you're going back to the physical therapist and getting some additional help. But at least now, instead of panicking and being like, I don't know what to do, I need to either do everything or do nothing or somewhere in between, you at least have a baseline starting point for what you need to try first. That gives you back so much power in your hip pain. I can't tell you guys how empowering it is for my patients to go from this constant spiral to suddenly being like, all the time I'll hear them say, you know what? My hip started feeling a little wonky this weekend after I went for a run, but I stopped. I did what we talked about, and it felt better. It worked. I didn't ever have a flare up. It used to flare up for 3 weeks, and it just hurt for maybe a day, and then it was fine by the next day. This is huge. It is so empowering for people, and I want you to know that it is possible for each and every one of you to have that exact same outcome. You just have to have the right strategy in place and the guidance and somebody who can sort of get you there and walk you along that path to get you to the place where now you feel a little bit more independent with it. In the beginning, it's not going to feel super independent, but we can get you there. Ultimately, this clarity and having this plan in place, it's things that you've already proved to your body feel safe and feel good to you. And this is honestly, it's what I end up calling the non-negotiables. So I kind of, with my patients, the term I'm always using is go back to your non-negotiables, your emergency plan, if you will, right? This is really where the whole idea of the non-negotiables came from that I give my clients. And it's through this trial and error, you've been able to come up with 2 to 3 predictable movements that have been tested over time that you know are sort of proven to calm your pain. Now, what that means is those 2 to 3 exercises are going to be different for everybody because everybody's hip and symptoms are different. Your body has its own way of talking to you, its own language, if you will, and you have to learn, how do I interpret that? But that's also why Googling random exercises doesn't work. Trying random things you've seen on Instagram and like piecing them together yourself doesn't work. It's because you're probably not listening to your body, and nobody has ever guided you through what your body needs to meet your hip where it's at. That's the piece that makes all the difference in the world. But once you know these non-negotiable exercises, these are the things that you go back to always. So in the beginning, it might be that's all you're doing because you're just trying to calm your pain. But the further you get along with your rehab or through this process, you're going to find that, my hip doesn't hurt anymore. I don't really need those exercises every day. But the power lies in the fact that down the line, if and when you have a flare-up, you know exactly what to go back to because it's what worked in the beginning. That's what I tell every single patient the first time they reach out to me and they're like, my hip flared up, what do I do? Go back to basics. Go back to the things, go back to your non-negotiable plan, the things that worked in the beginning, start there. If they don't work, we go back to the drawing board. But again, 99% of the time, it at least starts to give them the relief that we're looking for so that you can start to work on the other things and build back up. This is how we don't spiral. This is how you don't start to feel like everything you've done up to this point is a complete waste and none of it has worked and you've gone backwards to the beginning. You haven't. Flare-ups are part of the process. It's just learning, how do I manage said flare-ups so they never turn into a full-blown flare or setback, that they really just become a minor inconvenience. And like for me, being in this flare-up this week, I know that it's a minor inconvenience. I know that it's not going to turn into anything bigger because I've been through this before. And I know what works and I know what makes it feel better. And as soon as I start doing those things, I see some progress. And yeah, it might flare up again when I wake up the next morning and I have to do them again. But over the course of a couple days, week, whatever it is, it gets better, gone. And it never turns into anything more than just I'm a little uncomfortable today. And again, this is how I've kept it under control for so long because I have this plan in place. And it is possible for you. 100%. This is possible I believe this is possible for every single one of you listening. You just have to do the work to get there. And hopefully you do the work before you really need the emergency plan. You've got it in place. And it will give you back so much power in this process. So again, just to kind of recap, what we really want to work on here is, number one, having a good understanding of your own hip. So having a journal, a note, whatever that is for you that tracks your symptoms so you know what flares me, what makes it better, and you can kind of start to see some patterns so that if it starts to hurt again, you can look back and say, oh, yep, I was doing that thing and that usually flares me up. So we kind of are starting to track patterns. You are from that building your non-negotiables, 2 to 3 exercises that you know consistently make you feel better. Again, some trial and error in there, but you will find them. And then going back to those anytime you need them. You use them whenever you need it, whenever you feel your pain flare up. You always have a plan of action, or at least, like I mentioned, a jumping off point. And that's what you want to do. So I'm going to share with you what I did, but again, with the caveat that this is not necessarily what is going to work for you. I would not recommend taking these exercises and just go doing them on your own because, as I mentioned, every body is different. And it means that you have to have taken the time to understand your own body and figuring out what works for you. You will not see me very often posting exercises on social media. A lot of you guys got here because of social media. And all the time I get comments. You tell us that what's wrong, but you don't tell us what exercises to do. And it's because there is not a magic exercise. There is a framework that works, but the exercises, there's a million good exercises, but are they good for you? That's what we have to figure out. So I'm going to tell you what I did. As long as you don't take this as I'm going to go do these and this is going to be my magic plan, because it's not. What I did was some diaphragmatic breathing, because I know that when I'm flared, my pelvic floor is in knots. It is so tense. I'm holding so much tension through my pelvic floor, glutes, all of that. So I start with some breathing. And honestly, I do that kind of consistently throughout the day, because like even as I'm sitting here recording this podcast, talking to you guys, I feel that tension creep into my glutes. So I need to like tell myself to release it. Maybe I could do a couple diaphragmatic breaths, release that pelvic floor. Makes all the difference in the world for me. And then I do some dynamic stretching. So I have kind of this like posterior hip stretch that really works for me. Dynamic, so not getting into a stretch and holding it. Movement is always really good. And I did that. And then I did some hip airplanes, which is like a hip activation exercise for my deep glutes. Because again, I've learned that my body really likes activation style exercises, and I can kind of pinpoint, I know where the issue is. It's in those deep glutes. So I love the hip airplane as an option. Again, this is what worked for me. It's made me feel better, and my pain is almost gone at this point. The other things I've really prioritized are not sitting so much, getting off my computer, getting up and moving throughout the day, hydrating more. I know that's a huge piece for me. So pull in the electrolytes for a little while. Like I make sure I'm drinking throughout the day. That makes a really big difference as well. What I can tell you, so while this program is not a one size fits all cookie cutter program, what I can tell you is I have seen some patterns with past clients or current clients just in general over the past, 14 years at this point of doing this. There are some common trends of things that work really well for people, and I can share that with you. So I do find that breathing is often something that I will give people right off the bat. Pretty much that's safe for anybody. Even if you're in a really bad flare, we can know that breathing generally is going to work, and it's safe to do. It's not going to flare things up. It's going to help. It calms the nervous system down. So especially if you're somebody who your pain tends to be wrapped up in, periods of maybe higher stress, or you're feeling a little anxious, worried, pain is often correlated to that. So breathing can help kind of calm the nervous system back down. Plus it helps with that stress and anxiety from a mental load as well. So breathing is a really good one that I give to a lot of people. The other trend that I see in general is activation style exercises are so much better than aggressive stretching. Activation meaning you're actually getting the muscle to activate and contract. It warms it up a little bit better. That tends to create more release in the muscle than just trying to hold a stretch in there does. So for most people, part of their non-negotiable emergency plan is activation, body weight activation style exercises. And then the last thing is, if mobility is something that feels good to you, that it's in general feels better when it's dynamic mobility, which is mobility with movement. So again, there's a little underlying activation there, versus a static stretch, which is getting into a stretch and holding it. I find with most of my hip clients, static stretching actually flares them more. So very often do I have a static stretch in an emergency plan for somebody. It's usually much more movement-based things. And then again, it just depends on your personal situation and what your imbalances are, that, those exercises might take a twist or turn, or what should be in that program may look a little bit different. But I think that's a good, at least, starting point. Some breathing, some activation, some dynamic mobility, and some combination of that, some form of exercise within that generally works pretty well for most people. So again, if I can reinforce anything to you, it is do not spiral. Flare-ups are a normal part of this process. Your pain is going to be very up and down. That is a normal thing to experience. We don't want it to be the forever, but right now where you're at, it's okay to feel that. We just need a strategy to get you out of it. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're fragile and have to walk on eggshells with everything that you do. It doesn't mean you've lost all your progress. It just means you maybe need to listen to your body a little bit more and go back to basics so that you can then progress yourself forward. And again, the goal is that emergency plan makes it so that that flare-up never actually turns into a full-blown flare-up, and it's just a temporary inconvenience, but you know exactly what to do to make it better, whether it happens 2 weeks from now or 2 years from now. You've learned this information. You've got a tool in your back pocket that you can pull out anytime that you need it to consistently start to see some changes. So guys, I hope that that was helpful for you. If you are experiencing a flare-up or you don't know what to do, listen back to this episode, save it, bookmark it so that you can listen back when you're having a flare up so that you don't spiral. If you are looking for a way to track your symptoms, I have a free hip symptom tracker, which I will link below in the show notes so that you guys can feel free to use that one. You can download it. I also have the actual journal that you can purchase, which is like, the full basically 3 months worth of tracking that you can use. But it also can just be as simple as using something on your phone. So you don't need anything fancy. I'll give you a free starting point. And if you ever feel like you need a little bit more help coming up with the strategy behind creating your non-negotiable plan, do not ever hesitate to reach out. I'll put my email in the link below or in the show notes below. You can always reach out and we can talk some strategy of how can we come up with a plan that works for you. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you back here next week on Unchoreographed.